Good morning, everyone. This is day 5 of releasing what's weighing you down. And Nadia, you have a really good one too. They're all great. I always say this, but they're all great. Releasing guilt, which is huge. And I have a theory around guilt, especially in this arena. It can be in money or anything, but something that when we have a habit or some pattern in our life that is creating more guilt, it is there to mirror whatever guilt hey Melinda, whatever guilt or, hey Carrie, whatever guilt or emotion that we had in childhood. So releasing guilt is, if you think about it, if you float back to your childhood, how guilty did you feel in childhood? I carried tremendous guilt. I was raised Catholic. Sorry to any devout Catholics out there, but it's a recipe for guilt. So what I find is the guilt that we have in adult life, that we perpetuate unconsciously in certain arenas, be it food, be it money, be it our weight, be it our health, be it relationships. If you float back to childhood, to me, and again, this is my theory, I've just seen it with clients and with myself, it mirrors that same kind of guilt that we had and that we were feeling as a child. Hey, Dawn. So Melinda, Dawn, Carrie, happy to have you all here early. It's 6:21 here, and I'm doing this before I hop on the road with my daughter. So think about that. Just float back to childhood and think about the kind of guilt maybe. I know for me, I was constantly, good morning, Dawn. I was constantly trying to run away from guilt, yet I was constantly feeling guilty about everything. The quantity of stuff that I thought that I was going to burn in hell for was epic. So I literally walked around with my nervous system wired up for guilt. Shame is another one, but for this, I might throw shame in here, but I think somebody else put it. But so think about that. Just float back and God, the guilt that you carry, because I think unconsciously then, say when we're emotionally eating or if we carry excess weight, what do? We walk around with guilt. Oh, 8:20 in Ontario. Oh, thanks, Don. Yeah, it's 2 hours earlier here. So just think about that. And think about what was the primary emotions that you carried around a lot as a kid. So now float to present day. Think about if you carry excess weight and every time you look in the mirror, pay attention to the different emotions, because some people it's disgust. It just, when you look in the mirror at yourself, do this, try and look at this now as an experiment for these purposes. And notice, when I look in the mirror, what do I notice? How do I feel about myself? What do I see and say about what I see? And then when you're eating, if you think about food, let's say you go into a bakery and you're looking around, you're like, oh God, I really want that. But I shouldn't have it. The battle that begins within. So start to pay attention to those things, because what happens if you start to turn this into more of an experiment, just even knowing that can help you. What you're doing then is you're starting to separate yourself from it. You're starting to become the observer of the behavior, the observer of the emotions, and it starts to help you separate from the emotions that we get entangled in, and then that really helps. And when you become the observer of what's going on with you emotionally, you start to separate from the judgment of self because of it. You start to oh wow, I notice I'm feeling a lot of guilt, or I notice I'm feeling a lot of disgust, or God, I'm really feeling shame right now, instead of I am shame, I am guilty, I am disgusting. So just try that and see how that that works for you. Carrie, ignore myself, pretend it's not going to matter. So yeah, that's a big one. Thank you. That should be its own separate tapping thing. Carrie, if you think about it, can you post that in the thing? Because I have a lot of clients too that it's the observation is from the head up. So I'm going to ignore the rest of it. So that would be really good if you don't mind doing that. Otherwise, I'll try and remember to do that one myself, but that's really good. So ignore myself, pretend it's not going to matter. Oh my God, right. It's like, yeah, just going to act like it's there. I remember for myself, I would always try and find clothes that I felt were like covering me a bit more, hiding it more. All right, so let's dive in to the guilt. We're going to swan dive in. Karate chop. Even though I have this guilt, I constantly feel guilty. And it sucks. I choose to acknowledge I feel this way. Even though I carry a ton of guilt. And I live with the guilt. Every time I look at myself, every time I try on clothes, especially if they're too tight, every time I look at foods that I want, and then if I eat them, and I'm not supposed to have them, or just if I eat at all, I feel so much guilt. I accept myself and my feelings now. Even though guilt is my constant companion, I can feel guilty about anything and everything. I choose to acknowledge I feel this way now. All of this guilt, so much guilt, racing through my nervous system. It's my constant companion in life. Everywhere I go, it goes with me. And my guilt perpetuates the judgment. Because if I feel guilty, then the judgment swoops in, sorry about that, swoops in and takes over. So much guilt, so much judgment. I have no peace. Anything to do with food or my weight is a recipe for guilt. And what does this guilt remind me of? It reminds me of something. Probably the guilt I felt for just existing. Taking up space. Having needs. Wanting to be heard. Wanting to be loved and to feel that. I sometimes felt guilty. Maybe I always did. For asking for attention. For asking for a need to be met. For asking to be loved. So much guilt that I carried all the time. This constant, crazy loop of guilt. And it shows up in my weight, with emotional eating, and how I feel about all of that. What if my guilt really is a cry for love? What if my guilt is a cry for affection? What if my guilt is a cry to be heard? And what if I could stay present with myself, hear myself, meet my own needs, learn to meet my own needs, learn to love myself more and more? Because I learned to believe a lot of lies. They feel really true, but they're lies about myself. I fell asleep to all that's amazing inside of me. All the beauty, all the grace, all the abundance, all the well-being, all the worthiness, the lovability, the deserving. I learned to deny all of that. I was taught to. And guilt replaced all of these. Guilt is like the cloud moving in and covering the sun that is me. And what if I can start to observe my guilt now? Use my guilt to help me see what's going on with me. If this guilt had a voice that was really clear to me, what would the guilt be wanting me to see? If I start to see guilt that way, I can start to see it a little differently. And what if guilt can actually be a roadmap to me back to myself, to my truest nature? And as I release the guilt, I begin to remember the truth that I forgot from all the lies I was fed about myself, which were all the reasons to feel guilty. And those truths are that I was born brilliant, born beautiful, born amazing, born happy, born free, born totally loving and lovable and worthy and deserving of every good thing. And I may not feel these truths yet, but guilt can be my roadmap back to these truths as I become the observer of my guilt and use my guilt to help me. This guilt no longer has the same power over me. And then take a breath. So, hope you found that helpful, and I've found that really useful to go, if the guilt had a voice, which, you know, it's got its own voice, but if I could hear what the guilt was trying to tell me, what is it trying to tell me? Because then it becomes this component that helps us instead of this emotion that's like this. You can start to go, wow, I'm feeling guilt. Something's getting stirred up in me. You know, I'm feeling whatever emotion it is. We can start to use those emotions as barometers to go, wow, okay, something's off here. You know, I still love the Course in Miracles 2 lines. I choose to see love instead of this. Love did not create this thought. Whether those resonate with you or not, they're great pattern interrupts. Like when I catch myself like going, you know, circle in the drain, I'm like, whoa, I choose to see love instead of this. Love did not create these thoughts. Sometimes often I have to say these thoughts. It's just a great simple pattern interrupt that I can say quietly to myself, you know, especially if I'm in a situation where I'm not going to break out and tap in front of somebody. But if you could start to see guilt it can be this emotion that's like, wow, if I observe this, what does this remind me of in childhood? And what is it trying to tell me now? And then relieving the guilt. I feel so guilty. And it gets perpetuated every time you look at a certain food and like, oh, I shouldn't eat that. Try and go a little deeper when you can and go, what is going on here for me? What's below the guilt here? What am I trying to avoid? What am I trying to not see? That kind of thing. And hopefully you find that helpful too. So Carrie, Michelle, Dawn, Argelia, I hope I say that right. I know you've pronounced it phonetically for me. I'm so happy to see you all here live. If I missed anybody, sorry, I just can't. I'm paging down. That looks like that's who's here. Have a great, great rest of your day. I'm going to hit the road, Jack. Head up to Colorado to get my daughter settled in, back up at college. So that's it, ladies. Have a great rest of your day. You're all beautiful. Bye for now.